2025 in review from Kowa Podcast, Voice of the Many, not just a few. We are not here to offer empty wishes or recycled resolutions. We are here to account for 2025, a year that stripped illusions bare and exposed the world as it truly is. From the Sahel to Gaza, from Sudan to Congo, from Ukraine to Nigeria, 2025 made one thing unmistakably clear. The old global order is rotting, and its collapse is being paid for in blood, hunger, and silence posed upon the weak and oppressed. We watch sovereignty mocked, democracy hollowed out, and human life reduced to collateral damage. We saw power defend itself ruthlessly while demanding patience from those it continues to exploit. As we step into 2026, this episode is not a celebration of survival, it is a reckoning with reality, a refusal to forget what 2025 revealed, a demand that the crimes, the failures, and the hypocrisies of the past year are named without fear. And this is what we are doing here. This is Kowa Podcast, Voice of the Many, not just the few. Let's dwell into this episode of review. It is a 2025 in review and looking forward into 2026. Welcome to the first Kowa Podcast episode of 2026. We are not here to offer empty resolutions. We are here to document a world in crisis and a continent at a crossroad. From the Sahel in Africa to the Gaza in Middle East, the message is clear. The old order is dying, but the new one is being born in blood, fire, and hunger. The Sahel, ECOWAS, and African dilemma, military coups, and AES alliance. We look first to our brothers in the Sahel region, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. The formation of the AES alliance is not a security pact. It is more than a security pact. It's a scream for sovereignty in the eyes of many people living in that region. What began with military coups and threats of military action has now become a symbol of resistance to many of the West African people. At Kowa Podcast, we stand on a principled edge. We are democratic to our core. We believe power belongs to the people. We condemn coups and support people's power. But we must ask, what democracy are we supporting? And what democracy are we defending when leaders in the West Africa engage in constitutional coup? We see them shrinking civic space, handpicking judiciaries, and manipulating legislature to secure third, fourth, seventh, or even permanent terms. ECOWAS must learn to confront these discrepancies. It must stop threatening military actions, sanctions against countries seeking independence, instead examine the roots within its own institution. When constitutional breaches occur within ECOWAS member states, we do not hear the same loud condemnation in defense of freedom, democracy, and human rights. Instead of forcing member states to honor their commitment and addressing governance failure early before the military takeovers become possible, ECOWAS has remained selective. For many in the region today, ECOWAS is increasingly seen as a stick of Paris and Western imperialism. So, we are going to say this. We refuse to recognize a democracy where the true seat of power is in Paris or Washington or anywhere in the West, or even in the East, or is in the capital of any imperial power. Our Pan-Africanist heart beats for liberation, and that is both democratic and truly independent. If a system only serves a foreign master, it is nothing more than a sophisticated plantation in 21st century in the name of a democracy. 2025 see uprising around the world, in many parts of the world, military coups and takeovers in Africa. Mostly Gen Z youth take to the street in different countries, in Kenya, in Nepal, in Madagascar, many parts of the world. But let's talk about the Nepal. What's happened in Nepal is a global warning. When leaders choose reparation over reform, youth will remind them you can ban AF, but you can't ban revolution. Let's deep dive what happened. A government-imposed ban on social media platforms including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and X and YouTube triggered mass protests, primarily led by young Nepalese known as the Gen Z Revolution. The ban aimed at curbing misinformation sparked the worst unrest in the country for decades. Has never seen that kind of unrest. At least tens of lives lost in clashes with security forces, hundreds more injured, and protesters stormed parliament and even set fire government building. The protests forced the government to lift the ban and the prime minister to resign. But is that enough? No, it is not. And promised investigation into the violence that has taken place, as usual. But that is not enough. Here they topple the government and the new transition government is in place. It might be uncompleted revolution, but it is on its way. Now we are going to turn to a war in this world. The world watches the Middle East with a selective conscience. We have seen Israeli aberration and deprivation reach a fever pitch, shamelessly crying encirclement and so-called ring of fire while acting as the aggressor, launching attacks across multiple countries including Syria, Lebanon, and Qatar, all while backed by the bottomless pocket of the United States and its Western allies. And ongoing genocide in Gaza is continuing before that ceasefire, and Iran goes on 10 or 12 days war with Israel at that time, which means that there is nothing like encirclement by Muslims in Arab country. Israel is a Zionist settler colonial power, or even fire that wanted to burn everything in the region. And the resistance is not gonna stop. You may call it what you like, call it terrorism, call it whatever you like, name it with anything you like, but it is resistance. If there is no occupation and subjugation in that region, there will not be those processes in Lebanon, Hezbollah, in Palestine, Hamas, and other Palestinian armed groups. Meanwhile, in the Western Hemisphere, the U.S. continues its aggressive targeting of Venezuela using heavy economic sanctions as weapon of regime change, a policy that has failed now. It follows new playbook. That playbook is Iraq and Libya playbook. Under the banner of fighting narco-terrorism, inventing entities such as the so-called Cartel de la Sols, or the Cartel of the Suns, as U.S. corporations buy openly for Venezuela's resources. Washington fends Nicolas Maduro as a villain sitting atop world's largest proven oil reserve. And this is what they do with Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And they wanted to do the same thing with Maduro. He's a bad guy and sitting atop the oil resources. And this is not anything like that issue of fighting for democracy and bringing human rights. No. This is a resource grabbing, as widely documented by international analysts and investigative journalists and media. Recently, Max Blumenthal, renowned journalist that investigated on this matter. Either the US and China will work together on critical issues we all face, or they will expire together, bringing the rest of the world down with them. That is not a metaphor, it is the raw truth of our century, said Noam Chomsky. The quote mentioned above is Noam Chomsky's quote about the US-China relationship. If they didn't find a way to get together, unite, and face the challenge of this world, then this world is gonna come down, and it's not gonna come down along with them. It's gonna come down with the rest of us, as we will see in this report. The broader US-China trade war, where the global south is trapped in a destructive struggle for economic hegemony with tariffs weaponized on both sides with billions of dollars on each other and testing their own power, who is who, on technology, on weapons and minions, and also on diplomatic front and international stage. They wanted to continue doing this until the one is broken. But I don't think it is a time to say that in 2025, despite China having advanced technologically, it's not a mate of United States in this manner. But also, China is not that illiterate as it is taught by West and United States, to be honest. China is not that stupid. It's not how they project it. I mean, they are projecting China as a kind of a old, yeah, it's not. Now, weaponized on both sides, while billions are spent on a global arms race, billions of human beings remain hungry. In Sudan, a war now widely described as a forgotten war. I will not call it a forgotten war. I would call it
the Kowa Podcast. Like,
war,
comment, and share.
It is
no filter, just
by
truth.
the world. I mean, this war has been going on for quite a long time, but it is not given any care. It has displaced over 15 million people. This is the highest refugee crisis of our time, with hundreds of thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives lost. After 3 years of fighting, no side has the military capacity to defeat the other. The only wisdom left is for the warring parties to recognize that if the conflict continues, there will be no Sudan left to fight over. The war is deeply entangled in regional and geopolitical rivalries, involving Ethiopia versus Egypt in the GERD case, Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is the heart of rivalry
Kowa
between Egypt and
Podcast.
Ethiopia.
Like,
And each
comment,
of them
and share.
support
No
the
filter,
other side of the
just
conflict.
truth.
On the one hand, the UAE has been accused of arming and supporting the other side of the conflict.
Kowa
And
Podcast.
Saudi also
Like,
has its
comment,
with
and
external
share.
actor
No
arming
filter,
rival
just
factions
truth.
to the teeth.
Kowa
This war
Podcast.
is
Like,
never gonna
comment,
come to
and
an
share.
end.
No
And in this
filter,
equation,
just truth.
who lives and who dies does not matter. The hypocritical world remains silent. The billionaire class and the rise of fascism in 2025. Look at the wealth gap as we enter 2026. Elon Musk is on track to become world's first trillionaire. This is not merely personal success, it's a symptom of a broken system where the four grow four, while tech billionaires capture media, influence government, legislature, and control everything in the US, and also control narratives throughout the world, controlling narratives through algorithms, through our screens of social media. As documented across major investigative outlets, this concentration of power fuels the rise of far-right fascism, anti-immigrant xenophobia, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism across Europe, the United States, and Latin America. We must also confront the climate change and its devastating consequences. Let's confront this climate change issue. For our countries, in the global south, rising sea levels, extreme heat, and environmental collapse threaten millions, even as multinational corporations preach zero carbon emission. They still maximize profits and minimize human lives. They polluted the planet, and the global south face the unfathomable price. And this must be challenged. I mean, these guys are taking us for advantage. They don't care. They don't give a damn. I mean, they are just getting money for now and never think of a future generation. I mean, their children, their grandchildren, the world they're going to live for their grandchildren. Don't forget you are listening to Kowa Podcast, Voice of the Many, not just a few. And this is review of 2025 as we enter the new year 2026. Let's come back home. The failure at home, Nigeria's insecurity.
DME Kowa Podcast. Like, comment, and
the war
share.
against
No filter,
insurgency is
just
a
truth.
catastrophic failure we have witnessed. New waves of school children abductions in recent months in Northwest and Middle Belt. Terrorist occupiers seize land, wipe out villages, kill civilians under the pulse framing of farmer, herder, or communal clashes. This is not any of this. This is terrorism. What is going on in that enclave, Northwest Middle Belt, is not a farmer, herder clashes. This is fresh terrorism. In the Northeast, ISWAP and Boko Haram remain entrenched, targeting both military and civilians in most markets, roads, and towns and villages. And at this perilous moment, when unity is essential to confront threat shaking the nation's foundation, we see dangerous narrative emerging from far-right Christian nationalists and evangelicals, cycles in the US and the West, framing Nigeria's crisis as a Christian genocide. This narrative is false and politically motivated. Terrorists do not differentiate between faith. They don't. They don't differentiate between faith. They kill. And then why framing this issue as a issue of religion
This is
war?
Kowa Podcast.
If you are a
Voice of the
Nigerian,
many,
if
no
you are a
filter,
Muslim,
no
then you are
spin,
a
just
Rajvi.
truth.
We must reject the rhetoric prompted by
Kowa
Donald Trump and
Podcast.
others
Voice
which
of the many,
exploit
no filter,
suffering,
no spin,
domestic
just truth.
and international political gain.
This
This
is Kowa
oversimplification
Podcast. Voice of
ignores
the many,
the
no
truth of the
filter,
grim
no spin,
reality.
just truth.
The majority of death in the Northwest occur in predominantly Muslim areas. There are killings in
This is
Benue,
Kowa
Plateau,
Podcast.
Texas,
Voice of the
and
many,
parts
no
of the
filter,
Para.
no spin,
But
just
we are not
truth.
here to compare Nigerian lives by religion. If one insists on statistics, the numbers themselves reveal who is dying more. Terror has no religion, it has victims. The state failure to protect its citizens is not a religious issue, it is a constitutional collapse. And how this narrative and how dangerous and how attractive it might be, we have to ask this question. Who pawned the so-called religious conflict narrative or the Christian genocide narrative? Who benefits from keeping Nigerians divided by faith? Why are foreign think tanks and Christian lobby groups, both at home and abroad, are writing our story for us? Nigeria's tragedy is not a religious conflict or a Christian genocide. The answer to that is that Nigeria and its tragedy is not a religious war. It's a class, whether you like it or not. It is a class struggle disguised in many forms, kind of the elite versus the poor, the ruling elite versus the poor masses, the state failure versus the ordinary citizen, the corruption versus accountability. The mediocrity and versus revolution, absolutely. As we say goodbye to the year 2025, we demand justice. And we hope 2026 is the year we say goodbye to all these ills versus greed, state failure, and global hypocrisy. We demand a world where a life of a child and woman in Gaza and Sudan valued as much as life of a child in New York, London, or Paris, or Berlin, or anywhere else in the West, or anywhere in this world. The truth is not easy to hear, but here is all we serve, and justice must prevail, and people are revolting. Kowa Podcast is our voice, and here is where every voice matters. That is why it is Kowa Podcast. This is the review of 2026 Africa, world, and indeed the hope and wishes and prayers for 2026. This is Kowa Podcast, voice of the many, not just a few. See you in the next episode. Bye for now.